Hello everyone, this is Direwolf20 and welcome to part 2 of my mod spotlight covering refined storage. There's a lot of things to cover today that we want to get through, so I'm going to get right into it to show you guys some of the more advanced features of refined storage, such as auto crafting, the interfaces, the detector, wireless access, and even remote access to your network. Let's take a look. So one of the first blocks I'd like to show you is the interface. The interface is a nifty little block that can hold items for you or accept items and get them in and out of the network. So let's take a look. For example, if we wanted to keep 32 cobblestone available at all times to this block, we'd simply place it in the interface export scene. What this does is it pulls 32 items of cobblestone out of the grid, and it will go ahead and keep it there at all times. So every time I pull this 32 cobblestone out, it's gone. It's there. It's done. You can use this to interact with other blocks from other mods. So if you want to pipe items out with Ender IO conduits or with Buildcraft pipes, if Buildcraft exists in 110, or whatever, right? So you can use this block to basically interact with. Conversely, or even if you wanted to, you could hopper out of it. It's all good, right? So if we grabbed a hopper, boom, you would see the cobblestone going into the hopper, and it would keep the 32 cobblestone stocked. Neat. Conversely, you can also pipe items into it. So for example, any items placed in the import will automatically be sent into the system. You can apply speed and stack upgrades as well here. And the same for piping items in. So if we wanted to hopper items in there, we could throw the cobblestone into the hopper, and you can see it going straight in, and it's going to go ahead and be thrown into the grid network. Neat. We can do the same stuff for compare damage, NBT, and or a dictionary for the interface and the export. And then we can also toggle this with a redstone signal. Super cool interface. Unlike the import and the exporter, the fluid interface has a completely different block for it because the fluid interface needs to do things a little bit differently, as one might expect. So, for example, if we had a tank and we filled it up with some water. Boom, and boom. 2 buckets of water sitting there, right? Currently in the grid, we've got 39 buckets of water. If we configured this tank to dump into the inventory below it, that would go into the fluid interface, and the fluid interface would drop it into the system. So exact same functionality as the item interface, except for fluids. And then we can also tell it to keep a certain amount of liquids available at all times. So we can do that. And you'll notice it'll fill up with water. Neat. Upgrades applied. Cool. You can do compare NBT, and you can toggle with redstone mode. Next, let's talk about auto crafting. One of the ways you might want to auto craft is simply to get yourself a crafter. Not terribly hard to make. We'll just pop that down right there. Boom. We can see that it has redstone on and off mode, trigger auto crafting with a redstone signal, which we'll talk about in a minute, and the option for some speed upgrades. How does this work? Well, the next item you're going to want to make this work is a pattern grid. Pattern grids allow you to create patterns that are going to be used inside the crafter to do your auto crafting. So let's look at refined storage and get ourselves some blank patterns. Blank patterns are right here. And we'll go ahead and throw them into the pattern grid. So let's teach the system how to make our favorite item in the world, the furnace. Simply look up the recipe. Ta-da! And hit the create pattern button. What's nice about this system is that you don't need to have all the items available in your system at the moment that you want to create the pattern. So even though we don't have any wood in here right now, we can still create the pattern. You can also specify whether or not to use the ore dictionary so that if you have other types of wood, for example, it'll still be able to craft the chest and not require using oak wood, which is cool. I like it. You can now go over to the crafter and place your items in here. Holding shift will go ahead and let you see what the pattern's going to make. Now we can go over to our grid and we'll see that we have the option to craft the furnace or the chest. By the way, you can have this little button over here that I mentioned I would tell you about later. This switches the display from normal, which shows both items you have and items you can craft, to only items you have, aka no craftables, or only items you can craft. Neat. So if we want to craft that furnace, we can simply click on it and specify how many. Let's make 4 furnaces. Start, and it tells you that you're going to need 32 cobblestone, which you have available. Start, and ta-da, we just got 4 furnaces. Neat. The same for chests, however, it's going to warn me that we're missing the 8 planks that we need, so we can't hit the start button. If you'd like to keep track of the items that are being crafted by your system, look at the crafting monitor. You can go ahead and see that if you request 10 furnaces, for example, when you open up this UI, you'll see all the items being crafted. Nice. It also has a really good cascading feature. Let's look at, for example, the Stirling generator. I'm going to teach it how to make all the things the Stirling generator needs to have. So now we can see all the things that the Stirling generator needs to craft should be available to the auto crafting system. Starting with wood, we can turn wood into planks, we can go ahead and turn planks into sticks, we can get pistons, and we should be able to craft ourselves the Stirling generator. Neat. We also taught it how to turn stone into stone bricks. Let's go ahead and request 4 Stirling generators. You'll see there's a large number of items that need to craft. Some items are just available, like cobblestone, redstone, and iron. Other items need to be crafted. For example, we need to craft our pistons. And let's go ahead and actually take the furnaces out of there so that it also has to craft those. So if we say, for example, we want 5 of these, there's a lot of crafting to happen. When we hit start, we can see on the crafting monitor all the prerequisites and all the items that are being crafted working towards the Stirling generator. Pretty cool. And all the auto crafting is happening. And eventually we'll see it complete, and we got ourselves the 5 Stirling generators. That is awesome. This also extends beyond just vanilla crafting recipes. And by vanilla crafting recipes, I mean things that can be made in a crafting table. For example, if we want to teach this thing how to smelt cobblestone into smooth stone, it shouldn't be too big of a problem. Let's demonstrate. First, you're going to need a processing pattern encoder. This is what you can use to teach non-vanilla crafting table recipes to your refined storage system. All you need to do is place patterns in here, and in this example, we have to specify exactly which items are made and which items are the output. So for example, we're telling it cobblestone becomes stone. You can also specify the OR dictionary here if you wish. Once we've got this pattern, we need to go ahead and get ourselves another crafter. Okay. The crafter can be placed in such a way that it can interact with the block. Let's place it on the top. Neat. If you need to rotate your crafter, in this example it's facing that cobblestone, we actually want to rotate it, go ahead and make yourself a wrench. The wrench has several modes, one of them being rotation. And if we shift right click on this guy, we'll see that it'll rotate the block for us. Other blocks from other mods can rotate as well. We're going to go ahead and place the pattern for cobblestone becomes stone into the crafter. Don't forget, the crafter is going to have a network cable to make it accessible. We're going to configure the alloy smeltery to say that you can accept items from the top and that you're going to push items out the back. Finally, what we should do is get the stone from the alloy smeltery back into the RS system. And for that, we're going to need an importer. Simply hook up the importer, and then hook up your cabling. Now we should be able to craft stone. Let's try it out. If I clear the smooth stone out of my system, it should be available to craft. And if I ask for 20, it's going to go ahead and put 20 cobblestone in there. And any smooth stone that gets created will be sucked in by the importer. And we can check the processing right here and see how far along we are. Neat. This can be used for any other mod. So as long as you can get items into the block and then get items out of the block, you should be in good shape. It should also be noted that liquid crafting is supported as well. So any mod that adds a block that can be crafted with liquids, for example, a bucket, check this out. We can go ahead and set our pattern for water stone. And once we've got that water stone pattern, we just go ahead and click it into here. Nice. Notice that it needs 8 stone and 1 water bucket, and it outputs 8 water stone. When we request this, if we have water in our fluid grid, we will see that water stone is, instead of using a bucket of water, is going to use the 1,000 millibuckets of water that we have available. So even though we don't have a bucket of water in here, it's still going to be able to craft it. Neat. Hit start, and ta-da, we got our 8 water stone, and it used one of the buckets of water from the fluid grid. And now that I've done this twice, we're down to 19 water. Super cool. Do note, by the way, that if you want to craft with water, with your water stone, you are going to need to have some buckets or the pattern for a bucket in your system. So at this point, you should be well equipped to auto-craft anything with refined storage. Neat. Let's take a look at some other features of the mod. For example, let's talk about the wireless transmitter. This needs to be placed on a cable, like so. Boom. Neat. This can transmit a wireless signal 16 blocks. You can then get yourself a wireless grid. Pretty cool. This needs to be charged with refined storage power, and you can shift right click, I think, on a controller to link them. Linked to 205.67.381. Now you have access to all your items from anywhere, including your auto crafting. So if I need a furnace while I'm out in the field, I can go ahead and click the button, get a furnace, and I'm ready to roll. Nice. Note that it only has a range of about 16 blocks by default. What you're going to need to do is throw some range upgrades in there. Each range upgrade will increase it by about a few blocks. So if we get a few more range upgrades, the maximum this can go up to is 48 blocks. Not too shabby. So I can go 48 blocks away and still have access to my items. Sweet. It should also be noted that there is a wireless crafting monitor. Works pretty much exactly like a crafting monitor. So when you ask for something crazy, like a Stirling generator, you can go ahead and see what's happening. Speaking of wireless networks, you can also get yourself a network receiver and transmitter. Transmitters need to be placed on your network somewhere. Cool. You'll notice there's a slot for a network card, which is crafted like so. We can go really far away, zoom, let's say over here, and place down a network receiver. Shift right click with a network card. It's now linked to the receiver. Go over here, zoom, and place the receiver inside the UI. Notice that it says it's 68 blocks away. This is how you can tell how far away it is, and the further away the network receiver from the transmitter, the more energy it's going to draw. At this point, this block acts as your network, and you can attach anything you want, be it cables, or disk drives, or grids. And you can access all your items. Also note that this is a great way to throw down a wireless transmitter. And your items are now available to you again. Sweet. As you might expect, all of this wirelessness comes at a cost. The network transmitter is currently using 322 RS per tick, and the receiver is using 15. The wireless transmitter, 40. So this wireless transmitter is using 8 because it doesn't have any upgrades in it. Crafters also use a bit of power. So overall, with all the stuff that we've been putting on this network, we're currently using 419 RS per tick. Quite a bit more than we were using earlier. And this isn't even that complex of a network. Finally, you should know that there's an interdimensional upgrade that you can throw in your network transmitter. This makes it so that the receiver can be in another dimension. And if that's the case, the network transmitter will use 1,000 RS a tick. So just a flat 1,000. So it can be pretty much, depending on where it is in the same dimension, affects the cost. So the closer it is, the less RS. But if it's in another dimension, it's just a flat 1,000. By the way, one more note just to keep track of things. If you want these network transmitters and receivers to work, they do need to be chunk loaded. There is no automatic chunk loading here, so if your network transmitter and your controllers are not being chunk loaded, your receivers will not work. The next block I'd like to introduce you to is the Detector. If you're familiar with level emitters from the Applied Energistics mod, you'll recognize detectors. Basically, you can specify items or fluids, and you can specify what type of item to look for and how many. And it'll emit a redstone signal if it has enough within the system. So you can set it to emit when on the amount, meaning the exact amount, when above the amount, in which case we do have more than 32, or less than the amount. We don't have less than 32. If we dropped below 32, currently we're at 34, a little bit less, the redstone signal turns on. Put 31 in there, the redstone signal is still on. 32, we're no longer less than the amount. We're also not greater than the amount, but we are equal to the amount. Cool? And then if we threw one more in there, we're at 33, we're no longer equal to the amount, but we are greater than the amount. Awesome. You can also emit signal when item is being auto-crafted, which is pretty cool. It's something we didn't talk about too much with the crafter, but there's also an option here to trigger auto-crafting with a redstone signal. Neat. So if we hit yes on this, we can trigger the crafting of stone with a redstone signal. So for example, if we got ourselves a button, and we hit the button, notice it's crafting a piece of stone. Awesome. So this would be super useful in a lot of different mechanics. That's awesome. And we can do the same thing with this. So for example, if we say stone, notice now that when we're auto-crafting stone, so for example, let's request, I don't know, 20 of them, it's emitting a redstone signal while that crafting process is going. Super useful. You can also specify compare damage, NBT, and or dictionary. Same thing with fluids, by the way. So basically, if you want to keep track of how many fluids you have in your system, the level emitter or detector will work pretty well. Awesome. Once this is done crafting, by the way, notice the redstone signal turned off. Another thing I want to show you guys is the disk manipulator, which is a super cool and useful way to manipulate disks. It does exactly what it says on the tin. So the disk manipulator is cool. Let's pretend for a minute that we didn't have a storage block for cobblestone. We're going to pick that up. And then, like a foolish direwolf that I am, I throw a whole bunch of cobblestone into my refined storage system. And at this point, I say to myself, you know what would be really cool is if I had all my cobblestone on a 1K storage block. So I go to place it down and I set my priorities appropriately. You're going to be like a top priority, right? Number 10, and you're going to only allow cobblestone in here. That's the only thing you're allowed to get. Let's go ahead and move all the cobblestone that's already in our grid, which is probably sitting on one of these disks somewhere, and drop it into this. So there's two ways to do that. We could pull out all the cobblestone, but that's a nuisance. We don't want to have to do that. So the disk manipulator is our savior. We can go ahead and take out that 4K storage disk that has all those items on it, right? Now all the items are gone from our network, except for the 10 cobblestone that are just sitting right here. We throw it in the disk manipulator, boink, and what it's going to do is it's going to slowly but surely transfer items out. And of course, we can get ourselves some upgrades to make that process just a little bit faster. So I think the stack upgrade's allowed to go in there. Yeah, that's definitely going to make an improvement. And you can throw some speed upgrades in there as well. And ta-da, all of a sudden, the 4K storage disk is done transferring. What that's done is transferred all the cobblestone directly into here because it's like you're piping items into the system. So it's going to follow the priority rules. Anything that was not cobblestone landed on another storage disk, specifically this one. Nice. And then we can put this empty storage disk back in there and he can be used again. So the disk manipulator obviously has a couple options. IO mode is set to insert into network or extract from network. So if we wanted to, we could suck all the items out of there. So maybe I wanted to get all the items that are out of the network, right? So I could just remove the 1K storage block for a minute. And we get the 4K storage block and we throw it in there. Boom. It's going to suck all the items out of the network. And now the only thing sitting in there are the things that have been crafted. And of course the liquids, because there's no liquids in there. Now all those items are on the 4K storage disk. Pretty cool. So insert into network or extract from network. And then you can do type of items or fluid, white mode, black mode list, and compare damage, compare MBT, and compare or dictionary. All the stuff that you're familiar with. So this is a good way for cleaning your disks, basically. You can extract items off the disks or insert items into disks very quickly and automatically using the disk manipulator. So one more thing to show you guys is the wrench. I already showed you its ability to rotate if you shift right click. You can also right click in the midair to change it to configuration mode. What this will do is remember the configurations of things. So if I shift right click on this guy, it'll write the configuration to the wrench that I have. And then if I had another importer that I wanted to write that to, I could just shift right click again, and it'll go ahead and paste it in there. Sweet. If you want to clear the configuration, just switch it to rotation mode and back, and now the configuration is cleared, and you can write it again and read it again. Cool. All right, guys, and I think that about wraps up the mod spotlight for refined storage. I covered pretty much all the features. I hope I didn't miss any, but I'll probably find out if I did. For now, Dial20 signing off. Hope you guys enjoyed refined storage. In my opinion, this is a really awesome mod. It works. It works really well. It's stable, and it's fun, and it's really powerful. There's a lot of features that refined storage has that are just really hard to find elsewhere, especially in combination. And it is just super cool. The liquid storage piece, the voiding of excess items, the priority system, everything just works really well. So I like the mod, and I hope you guys too. For now, Dial20 signing off. Take it easy.